I've mentioned this before, but it was 3 DVDs that my parents got me when I was younger that got me into Transformers in the first place. And these 3 DVDs conveniently happen to be considered the 3 worst Transformers shows of all time. Transformers Cybertron, Beast Machines, and... Out of the 3, Beast Machines was probably my favourite, maybe because I own 2 volumes of it. Granted, one was the second half of season 1 and the other was the ending of the show, so I had absolutely no goddamn idea what was going on, but I still enjoyed the show regardless. As I grew up, however, I quickly found that Beast Machines Transformers was considered one of the worst Transformers cartoons of all time. Now, while I personally really like Beast Machines... Down, sir, this is the opinion police. What the hell? What are you... I said get down, sir, get on the ground, I swear. As I was saying, to this day, I still think Beast Machines is a pretty cool cartoon. Sure, it's played with plenty of errors, and I'll get to those in a moment, but I still like it. It was only really after watching Beast Wars years later that I realised why Beast Machines was so hated. So without further ado, let's talk about why people don't like Beast Machines. Starting with... So to start things off, it should be obvious that Beast Machines is the sequel to the incredibly spectacular and successful Beast Wars Transformers, which, in its own right, is one of my favourite cartoons of all time, due to its fantastic plot and characters. I still think it holds up today, despite the constant and tired joke of people complaining about the dated animation. We get it, it's aged. It was amazing for the time, and honestly, personally, I still think it's amazing today. But I don't know, I'm weird, what do I know? So following up from something as successful as Beast Wars was going to be no easy task. Beast Machines begins with a very confusing and honestly ridiculous introduction. We see 4 familiar faces, that of Primal, Rat Trap, Black Arachne, and Cheetor, in their beast modes from the first season of Beast Wars, on Cybertron, on the run from drones of some sort. Immediately, this raises plenty of questions. Why are they on Cybertron? Why are they no longer in their transmetal forms the show had them end on? Why can't they transform? Beast Machines purposely begins in a very vague way, only explaining the origin of the Maximals as the episodes progressed. You had to be 6 episodes in before the show finally explains what the hell is going on, which would be confusing for both casual viewers and fans of Beast Wars, which I imagine served as a turn-off for most outright. The marketing was also abysmal. For those who don't know, the gist of the show is that it continues immediately after Beast Wars' conclusion. The Predacons are all dead or defeated, Megatron is a prisoner of the Maximals, and the group returns to Cybertron victorious. However, Megatron manages to escape and get to Cybertron first, and by the time the Maximals get back to Cybertron, Megatron has entirely taken it over, ruling over the planet with his Viacon armies. As such, he seeks to purge the planet of anything organic, suddenly despising his animalistic alt mode, and so released a virus that paralyzed any organics that hadn't underwent the Transmetal 2 process, explaining away Silverbolt and Rhinox's disappearance. The remaining 4 Maximals found themselves trapped on a Cybertron run entirely by Megatron, and so spend the show trying to defeat him and regain control of the planet. Personally, I found it an enticing premise. The idea of the heroes having to be on the run from the dictatorial Megatron, who I felt was an absolutely terrifying villain. His portrayal in the series, while different to that of his depiction in Beast Wars, was what made it so threatening whenever the Maximals encountered him. The villains of the series are no longer the hilarious Predacons, but instead Viacons, a ridiculous amount of drones in the series. These include Thrust, the super cool and hip motorcycle drone general, Jetstorm, the charismatic reference-cracking leader of the jet drones, and Tankor, who was essentially just a Robo-Hulk. This cast would later expand to Obsidian and Stryker, and all of them were awesomely designed, were distinct and filled with character, and each awesome in their own right, particularly Jetstorm, who was amazing. The twist was, however, that each of the 3 generals were created from the sparks of characters in Beast Wars. Much of the show's first season was spent trying to uncover this plot point, and I thought it was really interesting. It blew my young mind, even if I had no idea who these characters were. Tankor was actually Rhinox, Jetstorm was Silverbolt, and Thrust was... Waspinator, right. The immediate issue was that because the generals were so cool, their absence was sorely missed when they returned to their Maximal or Predacon selves. Out of the original 3, however, Silverbolt is the only one to emerge, with Rhinox defecting and disappearing, and Waspinator staying as Thrust because he likes being thrust better. I wonder why. While Silverbolt is great and all, Jetstorm was easily the best character in the show. I mean, I'd storm his jet. And so having the most comedic and lively character in the show replaced with edgy McBroodlord was a bit of a letdown. The characters were reasonably well developed within Machines, however. For example, Optimus Primal's forceful actions in Season 1 having dire consequences later on. One of my favourite characters is the Diagnostic Drone, who is incredibly charismatic considering what he was. A drone. It goes to show how well done the characterization of the villains were in this show. The bad guys weren't just evil because they had their own personalities and agendas, and it made their side of the story just as interesting.
It's a revolution. It's Beast Machines.
Okay, time to address the Maximal in the room. Get it? Beast Machines has some of the most horrific designs in existence. Gone are the awesome blend of robotic and organic bodies that were the Maximals and Predacons in Beast Wars. Instead, the Maximals, who are supposed to be our heroes, who we are intended to root and care for, look like abominations that make me incredibly uncomfortable whenever I look at them. The reason I liked the Viacons so much was because they were robots. They looked cool, they were badass and threatening. Our heroes, on the other hand, Jesus Christ. I mean, look at their friggin' faces. They're horrifying. You'd think after a while seeing them in the show you'd get used to them, but I never did. They seem so out of place, what with the mismatched proportions, and dear Primus, look at those faces. Primal's fine, I guess, and Rat Trap is passable. Black Arachne is not so bad, but oh my god, never mind. The designs in Beast Machines are the easiest thing to knock, considering how horrifying our protagonists are. The show treats these bodies as the perfect blend of techno-organic, and yet the humanized Transformer designs cause me to root for the bad guys. For the love of God, do not let Cybertron become a planet filled with these things running around. And it doesn't get any better with characters introduced later on. Botanica and Night Scream were just as terrifying. And don't even get me started on Noble. This thing is apparently a Transformer. I physically don't understand how. He looks like an Animorph or someone's persona. He's not the worst thing I've ever seen, unlike some things in this show, but he just seems so out of place with everything. This is a Transformer show after all. The biggest issue for most, including myself, was the overall theme of the whole show. It was a cartoon focusing on the war between organic and technological. And for a series such as Transformers, in which the titular characters are kind of giant robots, it seemed a little strange for the show to be renouncing this idea. The show sees the Maximals seeking to purge Cybertron of Megatron's virus, while Megatron seeks the opposite. He wants to rid the planet of anything organic, and considering how organics look in this show, I really can't blame him. It's a clash between Megatron, representing the technological side of the Cybertronian race, and Primal, who stands for the organic side. Rather than using the conventional weaponry we've gotten used to with Transformers, the Maximals use plant-related weaponry, and even go as far as to start a garden at one point. Yeah, that was interesting. It's easy to see how ridiculous this looks, and it was the concept of an organic Cybertron that many despised, and I find myself having to agree. While the message of the show had good intentions, the idea of turning a series based around robots into whatever the hell this was supposed to be wasn't an appealing one. The show seemed to have a spiritual overtone. A lot of the show was focused on becoming one with the Oracle. Ooh. And in order to transform, the Maximals had to say, "I am transformed." Something that became so annoying that they stopped doing it in the second season. At times, it felt like it had a forced agenda, which really contributed to turning many people away from it.
Yes. 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 Yes.
The noticeable difference between Beast Wars and Beast Machines was its tone. Beast Wars knew when to be dark, but still had its lighthearted moments. One episode focuses on Rhinox farting, however. In this respect, I actually admire Beast Machines, as it didn't cross this line of silliness that Beast Wars felt obligated to do since it was still a kid's show. Beast Machines didn't, but at the cost of being too dark for a children's cartoon. I mean, hell, it sure scared the absolute shit out of me when I was younger, especially these things. Fuck these things. Beast Wars was about war, hence the name, but the show was filled with bright colours and flashy characters. Beast Machines, taking place on Cybertron and all, is coated in shadows and bleak colours. The brightest thing in Beast Machines were the Maximals, and I've already complained enough about them for you to understand why that was an issue. Overall, the show just wasn't as appealing to look at as its predecessor. It was also the characterization of certain characters that pissed off fans to no end, and after watching Beast Wars, I can see why. Almost every returning character in Beast Machines was portrayed differently to how they were in Beast Wars, which, while it could be passed off as development or a change of attitude due to the bleakness of their situation, seemed instead like radical changes for established characters. Rat Trap went from this quirky yet badass Maximal to a coward, an idiotic comic relief that for some reason became the technology-obsessed character, due to Rhinox's absence. Megatron became a darker villain with different ideals and plans, and Silverbolt became an absolute edgelord instead of the goofy character from the previous show. These changes were obviously made to keep the tone of the show dark, which is understandable, as if these comedic aspects had carried through to Beast Machines, they would have clashed with the darker feel of the show. However, none of the characters felt the same, and though serving as a sequel to Beast Wars, it's hard to imagine any of these generally quirky and fun-loving characters being the same bots as these things. The biggest issue for many was Rhinox's portrayal, due to the Maximal turning traitor after the Maximals recover him from within Tankor. Rhinox showed absolutely no signs of wanting to quit the Maximals in Beast Wars, barring that one episode where Megatron cheated, but in Beast Machines he straight up refuses the aid of his former friends, claiming to have seen Megatron's side of the argument and opting for a technological Cybertron. Once again, really can't blame him. This drastic and sudden change of an awesome character in Beast Wars seems strange and out of place. And though it was a ballsy move on behalf of the writers, it just seemed like an easy way to write out a potentially useful character. It was an interesting twist and one that I admire, but it didn't really make much sense considering how Rhinox had previously been portrayed. Where this twist became ridiculous was when Rhinox's personality emerged from within Tankor, and he began to conspire against both Megatron and Primal. This wasn't Rhinox anymore, and it was a disgrace to the character that had been the favourite of many.
Well, that's just Prime.
The biggest flaw with Beast Machines was its choice of storytelling. While watching the show altogether makes it feel like a movie, what with the overarching plot, it made it difficult for viewers to hop in at random points. Though Beast Wars followed a linear story throughout its 3 seasons, it still had certain episodes where new concepts were introduced and concluded at the end of the episode. Beast Machines instead opted for a continuous and linear story, which, while good in some aspects, caused the show to have incredibly repetitive action scenes. A lot of the show just sees the Maximals running away from things, and this happens way too often for it to be interesting. Also, f*** Cheetor and his f***ing swords. Look at me everyone, I can deflect things with my sword. Let's play this clip every single time there's a goddamn action sequence. The second season is much better, seeing the Maximals attempt to work out what the hell to do next after Megatron's supposed demise. It saw them less on the run and more in control, and though slow, it was interesting. My particular favourite episode would have to be when Megatron is nothing but a spark, possessing the bodies of the deceased and terrorizing the Maximals. Once again, very interesting episode concepts that were absolutely terrifying as a kid. However, the pacing of the show was all over the place, making it once again difficult to hop onto the show midway. However, despite everything I've complained about, one thing I refuse to back down on is the ending fight between Primal and Megatron. The stage was set perfectly, Megatron uses Primal's optimal body from Beast Wars, and the two spend almost half the episode pounding each other into scrap. It was epic, it was amazing, and it was a brilliant way to end the show. If Beast Machines does nothing else right, at the very least, it went out with a bang. Beast Machines does provide us with a hell of a lot of fan service, however. While not reaching the level of showing the actual arc itself with the dormant Autobots in it, which still makes me explode with fangirliness, we have things such as G1 body type showing up, the key to Vector Sigma, the hate play, and even Optimus Prime himself sort of showing up, but not really. Where it really shines through is with its connections and references to Beast Wars. Credit has to be given where it is due. The writers brought over several elements over from Beast Wars and still wove them into the story. Fan favourite Waspinator returned, which was nice despite how little of him there was in the show, and as previously mentioned, Megatron dons Primal's odd body for the final showdown. They were nice little nods to the previous show, and though we saw very little of it, it was so cool seeing Beast Wars characters show up in a show that was so drastically different. Also, Beast Machines is the only Transformer show without any humans in it. Granted, I'd take Mika over this whiny piece of shit any day, but it's still worth a mention. Also, Beast Machines' score is awesome. Seriously, listen to that theme song. I'll stop dancing, I'm sorry. Is it perfect? God no. But I have to hold Beast Machines in high regard, not simply because of the nostalgia I have for the series, but the goal it had to try something different in a new and interesting way. As we've mentioned, there is a hell of a lot wrong with Beast Machines, and it could be considered one of the most boring Transformers cartoons. But it was the show that had the final battle that put an end to not only the Beast era, but also the entire Generation 1 cartoon continuity. While it may have ruined the absolute crap out of Beast Wars' characters and ending, the finale of Beast Machines saw Primal sacrificing himself to reformat Cybertron into a techno-organic utopia, finally destroying Megatron in the process. The plot boasted grand ideas, and the storytelling was fantastic, even if it was a little stretched out. Ultimately, where Beast Machines falters is in its presentation, combining ugly designs and a forced message that really affected how the show played out. I can definitely understand why Beast Machines is considered one of the worst Transformers cartoons of all time, especially considering what it did to Beast Wars' mythos. However, the series still has a little bit of a close place to my heart, whether that be from the fact that it was one of the very first Transformers shows I ever watched, or just the charm the series has when it came to its grand storytelling. Regardless, Beast Machines did not go down well with fans, and as a result, it almost ruined the franchise forever. Thanks for watching.